I used to believe a church hymnal could not hold evil. Then I opened the one in my husband's study and found a note tucked behind an old funeral program. It was not a prayer, it was not a verse. Just one crooked typed sentence. If Clara asks questions before Friday, make sure she never asks another. For 3 seconds, I wondered who Clara was. Then my whole body went cold. Because I was Clara. And before that Friday came, I would learn my husband had another woman pregnant in Charleston, stolen money hidden under false names, tickets to Panama, and a plan to make me disappear or take the blame. But Walter forgot something. A quiet wife is not always a blind one. My name is Clara Harlan, and back in 1968 I was 30 years old, living in a small mill town in North Carolina where everybody knew who sat in which church pew, but nobody knew what happened once the curtains closed. My husband, Walter Harlan, was the kind of man people trusted before he earned it. He worked at Carolina Mutual, a savings office downtown. He wore gray suits, carried a leather briefcase, and shook hands with a soft smile that made people feel safe. The pastor called him dependable. The bank president called him promising. My mother-in-law called him a blessing. I called him husband because I had been raised to believe a woman carried her vows even when they cut into her hands. We had 2 children. Daniel was 9, serious and watchful, always taking apart old radios to see what made them speak. Ruthie was 7, all curls and crayons, drawing flowers on the backs of grocery lists. To the town, we looked like a proper family. But inside our home, Walter controlled the air. He counted grocery money every Monday night. He opened the mail before I touched it. He decided which neighbors I could visit and how long I could stay. If I asked a question he did not like, he did not shout. He went silent. And believe me, a man's silence can feel like a locked room. Every second Monday, Walter traveled to Charleston for accounts review. That was all he ever called it. He came home with his suitcase too neat, his shirts barely wrinkled, and a smell on his coat that did not belong to any office I knew. Cigarettes, expensive soap, and sometimes perfume so faint I convinced myself I was imagining it. You know how it is. Sometimes your heart knows the truth before your courage does. That Tuesday afternoon, a headache drove me into his study. Walter kept strong aspirin in the desk drawer, and the study was forbidden. He said a man needed one private place in his own house. But pain made me brave. The room smelled like pipe tobacco and paper. I found the aspirin, turned too quickly, and bumped the lower shelf with my knee. A church hymnal slid forward. It had been shoved in wrong, like someone had hidden it in a hurry. When it fell open, the paper slipped out. I read the note once. Then again. If Clara asks questions before Friday, make sure she never asks another. The words looked calm, that was the frightening part. Whoever typed them had not been angry, they had been planning. At the bottom was a small handwritten mark. IFS. Franklin Shaw. Walter's supervisor, his closest friend, the man who once called me a fine little wife while handing Walter a cigar after Sunday service. I put the paper back with trembling fingers. I returned the hymnal to the shelf. I walked out with the aspirin in my hand and a death sentence burning inside my mind. That evening, Walter came home, kissed Ruthie's forehead, asked Daniel about school, and sat down to the pork chops I had cooked. And I passed him the salt. Isn't that something? A woman can sit across from the man who may be planning her ending and still ask whether he wants more gravy. But the wife who obeyed him was gone. In her place stood a quieter woman. A watching woman. For the next few days, I studied Walter like a stranger hiding in my house. I noticed how he locked his briefcase even when he only went to wash his hands, how his voice dropped whenever Franklin called, how he stopped speaking when I entered the room, then smiled too fast. I also noticed the children watching him. One evening, Daniel asked if Walter would come to his school science demonstration. Walter did not even lower the newspaper. "Ask your mother," he said. Daniel's face closed up like a door. Ruthie stopped coloring and looked at me, waiting to see whether pain was allowed at the table. That was when I understood something worse than betrayal. If Walter could erase his children without blinking, what else could he do? The first real clue came from his travel coat. I was brushing lint from the sleeve when my fingers touched paper tucked deep inside the inner pocket. It was a receipt from a Charleston jeweler. A sapphire engagement ring. Not a necklace, not a gift for me. An engagement ring. The price was more than Walter allowed me for 4 months of groceries. Behind the receipt was a card with an address written in neat blue ink. No name. Just a street in Charleston. My first feeling was humiliation. That dull, private ache of realizing you have been replaced while still washing the man's socks. But then I remembered the notes. The warning did not say, if Clara finds out about the woman, leave town. It said make sure she never asks another. So this was not only about another woman. This was about me becoming the one loose end Walter could not afford. The next week I told him I needed fabric from Charleston for a church dress order. He barely looked up. Don't waste money, he said. I won't, I answered. By then, every lie I told him tasted like survival. I found the address near the water, a narrow yellow house with white curtains and a porch swing. A woman next door was sweeping leaves. I told her I was looking for a music teacher for my daughter. Oh, Miss Elaine Porter, she said. Sweet girl, 6 months along now. 6 months? My smile stayed on my face, but my stomach turned. And her husband, I asked. Not husband yet, the woman said, lowering her voice. He comes every second Monday, says he has some old situation back home to settle. Second Monday. Walter's accounts review. I walked to the bus station with my gloves clenched in my hand. In Charleston, I was not a wife, I was an old situation. But I still did not know the whole truth. That came 3 nights later. Walter came home early and went straight to his study. I was folding towels in the hall when I heard Franklin's voice through the closed door. Calder comes Friday. Walter answered, then Friday is the last day Clara can matter. My hands went numb. Calder. I knew that name. Lionel Calder was a state auditor who inspected savings offices across the county. Walter hated him, called him nosy, righteous, and impossible to charm. Honestly, that sounded like the first honest man in the whole story. The next morning, I searched Walter's study again. Carefully, slowly. I found nothing in the desk, nothing in the cabinet, nothing under the rug. Then I noticed the brass key Walter usually wore on his watch chain was missing. I found it taped beneath the bottom of his tobacco box. Just as I pulled it loose, I heard his car in the driveway. For one terrible second, I stood there with the key in my palm and nowhere to hide it. I shoved it into my mouth. Walter opened the study door while I was pretending to dust the shelf. The metal tasted bitter under my tongue. What are you doing in here? Dusting, I said, though the word came out thick. He stepped closer. Since when do you dust my study? Since Ruthie sneezed all morning. His eyes moved over the shelf, the desk, my face. Then he smiled. Helpful little wife, he said. When he left, I leaned against the wall and nearly sicked up that key. It did not open anything in the house, not the desk, not the cabinet, not the trunk in the attic. 2 days later, at the train station, I saw a row of private parcel drawers near the baggage office. The key fit number 17. Inside was the life Walter had planned without us. 2 passports with false names, tickets to Panama, a folded map, letters from Elaine calling him my future husband. And files. Not ordinary bank files, insurance settlements, widow benefits, unclaimed pension payments from dead mill workers, names I knew from church, men buried years ago, women still buying flour on credit. Walter and Franklin were stealing from people too poor to notice quickly. The final theft was hidden inside a county payroll bond deposit scheduled for Friday. $275,000. Walter was not only leaving me, he was stealing enough money to disappear, and I had become the one loose end he could not afford. I had just put the files back when the parcel clerk looked over his counter. "Mrs. Harlan," he called, "isn't that your husband's drawer?" My heart stopped. I turned slowly and smiled. Yes, he sent me for an insurance envelope, Walter, always trusting me with errands when he's too busy. The clerk laughed. "That man does work hard." "Yes," I said, "he surely does." I walked out of the station with my spine straight and my knees shaking beneath my dress. That night, Walter ate supper and asked Daniel to pass the bread. I watched his hands. Clean nails, wedding ring, steady fingers. A man's hands can look innocent while signing away other people's lives. I made my plan before dawn. First, I needed money Walter could not count. For years, I had earned small amounts sewing dresses and hemming curtains. Walter called it needle money, like it was harmless. What he did not know was that I had hidden little bills in thread tins, pattern envelopes, and the lining of a winter coat. It was not much, but to me, it looked like a road. My client, Mrs. Abernathy, came for a fitting that afternoon. She was a widow with a silver cane and eyes that missed nothing. While I pinned her sleeve, I asked quietly, "Can a woman open an account without her husband knowing?" She met my eyes in the mirror. "I know that question," she said. "I asked it once too late." That was all. The next morning, she drove me 2 towns over and helped me open my own account. I deposited every hidden dollar. Then came evidence. I could not accuse Walter with tears. People forgive men like him and doubt women like me. I needed facts. Mrs. Abernathy lent me her old typewriter. I typed a letter to Auditor Calder with one finger so nobody could recognize my hand. I copied names, dates, drawer numbers, and the payroll bond schedule. I included photographs from a little camera Mrs. Abernathy's nephew developed under his own name. No signature, just truth. Getting it to Calder was dangerous. The sheriff hunted with Franklin. The savings office president golfed with Walter. The pastor praised them both every Sunday. So I used what Walter underestimated most: my sewing. The hotel where Calder would stay had asked me to mend the lining of the manager's coat. I stitched the envelope inside, then left a typed note in the pocket. "Place this in Mr. Calder's hands. Please do not tell Walter Harlan, I am begging you." My legs shook all the way home. Then I waited. Waiting is a cruel kind of work. The day before the bond deposit, Walter became gentle. That scared me more than anger. He watched Daniel fixing his radio. He told Ruthie her drawing was pretty. He handed me extra money for thread and said, "Buy yourself something decent." I almost cried right there. Not because it was kind, because it sounded like goodbye. That night I packed 2 bundles under the bed: clothes, birth certificates, my bank book, and my mother's locket. I stood in the children's doorway and promised them silently that they would not pay for their father's sins. Friday came bright and clear. Walter dressed in his best suit. "I'll be late," he said. "I figured," I answered. As soon as he left, I took Daniel and Ruthie to my sister-in-law Nora's house. I told her I had sewing due and needed quiet. Then I returned home alone. By noon, I had washed the same cup 3 times. By 4, I had checked the road so often the curtains stuck warm to my fingers. By 6, I heard a car slow outside and thought Walter had come back for me. It passed. At 7, sirens tore through town. I ran to the window. 2 police cars and a state vehicle raced toward Carolina Mutual. For the first time in weeks, I breathed. Then someone pounded on my back door. Not police. Not Walter. Elaine Porter stood there, pale, shaking, one hand pressed against her belly. "Is Walter here?" she whispered. For a second, anger rose so fast I nearly choked. This was the woman with the sapphire ring, the woman waiting for my life to vanish, the woman who thought my children were the old situation. But then she looked at the photographs of Daniel and Ruthie on my wall and began to cry. "He told me you were cruel," she said. "He said you trapped him. He said the marriage was dead." Her voice broke. And I believed him because believing him made me innocent, but I knew there was a wife somewhere. I let him make you less real. That honesty did not heal me, but it stopped me from hating her the way I wanted to. Then she pulled a letter from her purse. Walter had instructed her that if anything went wrong, she should tell police I knew about the money, that I helped hide papers, that I was jealous and unstable. He had planned to frame us both, depending on which lie saved him first. Before I could speak, Elaine cried out and bent forward. The pains were not full labor, but fear had taken hold of her body. I sat her down and called Nora. "Keep my children," I said. "Do not let anyone take them but me." Then came another knock. This one was firm. Lionel Calder stood at the door, rein on his coat, jaw tight. "Mrs. Harlan," he said, "your husband and Franklin Shaw are in custody." I thought relief would feel warm. It did not. It felt empty. Calder explained that the evidence had led him straight to drawer 17. Walter tried to move the payroll bonds through false pension accounts. Franklin panicked. Walter blamed Franklin. Then Walter named me. Elaine lifted her head. "That's a lie," she said. "He gave me a letter telling me to say the same thing." "And isn't that something?" The woman I thought had stolen my life helped save it. Calder took her statement and sent her to the hospital to be checked. Then he took me to the station. Behind a glass partition, I saw Walter. His suit was wrinkled, his hair had fallen over his forehead, but his eyes still had that old command in them, like he expected the room itself to obey. "You," he said. Just one word. I stepped closer. "Yes," I said, "me." For 11 years, I had lowered my voice for that man. "Not anymore." "You ruined everything," he hissed. "No, Walter," I said, "I saved my children." By morning, the town had made a feast of my misery. Curtains moved as I passed. At the market, Mrs. Pritchard from church leaned close and whispered, "A wife always knows more than she admits." I looked at her hand on my sleeve until she removed it. "No," I said, "sometimes a wife survives what nobody cared enough to see." That afternoon, I told Daniel and Ruthie their father had done something serious and would not be home. Daniel stared at me, too quiet. "Did he hurt you, Mama?" I kissed his forehead. "Not anymore." The house became unbearable after that. The whispers, the legal papers, the memories in every room. I had already written to Beatrice, my childhood friend in Philadelphia, who ran a tailor shop and had offered me a room above it if I ever needed help. Now I did. Before sunrise, I packed 2 suitcases, gathered my children, and stood one last time inside the house where I had spent 11 years shrinking. I did not cry. Walls built on lies do not deserve tears. At the bus station, Mrs. Abernathy pressed an envelope into my hand. "For the shop you're going to own someday," she whispered. I stared at her. She smiled. Women like us know when another woman is about to survive. The bus pulled away, and I watched North Carolina disappear through the glass. For the first time in years, I was not Walter Harlan's wife. I was Clara. Mother seamstress, survivor. I thought Walter's arrest was the end of the story. I was wrong. The hardest part was learning what to do with the people his lies left behind. 3 years passed before I saw Elaine again. By then I lived above Beatrice's tailor shop in Philadelphia. It was small. The The stairs creaked. In winter, frost gathered inside the window, but Daniel had a desk for his school books, Ruthie had a box for her drawings, and I had work every day. We were tired, but we were free. Then one cold afternoon, I saw Elaine in the basement of St. Agnes Church, standing in the charity line with a little boy holding her skirt. His name was Samuel, Walter's son, my children's brother. Lord help me, he had Walter's chin. Elaine saw me and looked like she wanted the floor to open. I'm not asking forgiveness, she said later outside the church. I'm asking for work. I can keep books, sweep floors, answer phones, anything. Her parents had turned her away. Walter had written from prison saying he needed to start over alone when he got out. Schools would not hire her once they heard the scandal. I looked at Samuel, innocent and shivering in a coat too thin for January. Then I looked at Elaine's. I have one rule, I said. No lies, not in my home, not near my children, not ever. She nodded, crying before she could answer. But mercy was not easy. Daniel would not look at Samuel for months. Ruthie wanted to share crayons with him right away, but Daniel stood in the corner with his fists tight. One night when Samuel laughed, Daniel snapped, "Why does he get Dad's face when Dad left us?" Elaine went white. I wanted to scold him, but part of me had wondered the same thing. So I sat beside my son and said, "Your anger is allowed, cruelty is not." That became the rule for all of us. There were days I regretted opening the door, days Elaine apologized and I was not ready to hear it, days Samuel's smile hurt before it softened me. But slowly, work saved us. Elaine kept appointments. I sewed until my fingers ached. Ruthie sketched dress designs on brown paper. Daniel swept floors after school, still quiet, still wounded. Then one evening, I saw him teaching Samuel how to wind a toy car. I turned away before he could see me cry. The two women Walter thought he could use and discard built a future from the wreckage he left behind. Years passed, Beatrice retired, and I bought the tailor shop with Mrs. Abernathy's money paid back in full. Clara Harlan Designs became a real business, then a respected name. Ruthie grew into a brilliant designer. Daniel became an engineer. Samuel grew up running through the shop like he had been born under the cutting table. At trial, Franklin confessed to typing the note. He claimed Walter had spoken the words first. I did not care which coward held the keys and which one turned the lock. A death sentence typed on paper is still a death sentence. Walter served his years and came to my shop once after prison. He stood in the doorway, gray-haired, smaller than memory. Elaine was at the front desk. Ruthie's sketches hung on the wall. Samuel laughed in the back room. My name was painted on the glass. Clara Harlan Designs. For once, Walter had entered a world he did not control. "What do you want?" I asked. "To know if you're happy," he said. I studied the man I had feared, served, and nearly died trying to understand. And I felt nothing I expected. No love. No fear. Not even hatred. Just distance. "Yes," I said, "despite you." He lowered his eyes first. That was enough. Franklin asked forgiveness years later. I gave him peace, not friendship. There is a difference. Walter died quietly, without the grand life he tried to steal. We attended the funeral because the children needed peace, not because I owed him grief. And Elaine. She never left. Not as my rival, not as my burden. As family. Now I am 80 years old. My grandchildren know this story as the beginning of our strength. The business belongs to Ruthie and Samuel now. Daniel still fixes every crooked shelf when he visits, even though he owns a company big enough to hire someone else to do it. Sometimes I think about that young woman in Walter's study, holding a note that was meant to end her. I wish I could whisper to her, "Clara, the life you are losing is not the life meant for you." Because that hymnal did not destroy me. It opened my eyes. That note did not bury me. It gave me the courage to walk out. And if you are listening from inside a life where your voice feels small, let me tell you this. Sometimes freedom does not arrive gently. Sometimes it comes dressed as betrayal, fear, and heartbreak. But when the door opens, walk through it. Even with shaking hands. Because the woman waiting on the other side may be stronger than you ever imagined.